The alarms echoed through the high chamber as the council of non-human guardians surrounded the lone human standing in the center. Their glowing eyes, carved with centuries of authority, moved from one another before fixing on the trembling figure they believed had broken their sacred laws. The air felt heavy, like even the walls were holding their breath. Everyone in that ancient hall knew what the verdict would be. Humans were rarely shown mercy here. And yet, the human stood steady, clutching an old artifact that everyone else believed was nothing more than a useless relic. No one expected it to speak. No one expected it to choose. Moments earlier, the council had declared the human guilty, their voices rising together like cold thunder. They claimed the human had trespassed into forbidden grounds, interfered with ancient archives, and touched the relic that outsiders were never allowed to approach. The accusations stacked up quickly, and the crowd watching from above whispered harshly, confident that justice, or what they believed was justice, had already been decided. But the human knew the truth was buried deeper than anyone wanted to admit. The relic had called to them and had responded, and it was about to expose everything. The artifact looked simple on the outside, a smooth stone with faded lines that shimmered when held in the right light. The council had ignored it for years, calling it an old symbol of past keepers, a reminder of duties long gone. But when the human touched it, the lines brightened like living fire, as if recognizing something no one else could see. The room went silent as the artifact lifted from the human's hands and began to spin in the air. Even the bravest of the guardians stepped back, unsure whether they were witnessing a miracle or a threat. As the energy from the artifact filled the hall, memories and echoes of forgotten history rippled through the air. It revealed visions of the first keeper, Justice, a figure wrapped in light, and beside them stood a human marked on their skin with the same symbols glowing now on the floating stone. The council gasped, confused and shaken, because these images contradicted everything they had taught. Humans weren't supposed to be part of their sacred order. Humans weren't supposed to be chosen. And yet, here was the truth shining in front of everyone, undeniable and alive. The artifact drifted back toward the human, marking their arm with the same ancient pattern, burning softly like a warm brand of destiny. The guardians stared in disbelief. Some resisted it, refusing to accept what the relic was revealing. Others stepped forward, shaken by the possibility that their entire history had been filtered, edited, or erased. The human said nothing. They didn't need to. The mark spoke for them, declaring them something more than an outsider, something the council had never expected to face again. Before anyone could react, the artifact released one final pulse of light that shook the hall, knocking some to their knees, and then silence, heavy, charged silence. The human looked up, the new mark glowing like a promise and a warning. Not guilty, chosen. And now, the true story was about to begin. The chamber stayed quiet for a long moment, as if the air itself was trying to understand what had just happened. The human kept their eyes on the shifting glow on their arm, feeling its warmth spread through their skin like a heartbeat that didn't belong to them. The guardians circled slowly, their steps cautious now, no longer confident in their judgment. A few whispered to each other, trying to make sense of an artifact they had dismissed for generations, while others stared at the human with a mix of fear and curiosity. Whatever the relic had awakened, it wasn't just a mark. It was a memory returning after being buried too long. The human's thoughts drifted back to how all of this started, not in some ancient hall, but in a quiet corner of the archives where they had been working as a simple researcher. Humans weren't allowed near sacred relics, but they were allowed to clean around them, classify fragments, and keep records. That's all the human had wanted to do, understand the forgotten histories that the guardians claimed were too dangerous or too fragile. But every time they walked past the old stone, they felt something pull at them, a soft whisper in the back of their mind. They ignored it for days, until the pull grew stronger and the relic lit up even through its protective glass. They knew something wasn't right, yet they didn't feel afraid. They felt recognized. When the guardians found the human standing before the relic with its symbols glowing, everything changed. The council rushed in, demanding answers, accusing the human of breaking laws. But every word spoken against them felt like it came from people more scared than angry. Now, watching those same figures shift uncomfortably in the chamber, the human understood why. If the ancient keepers had once chosen humans as allies, or something even more important than the guardians' entire belief system was incomplete, maybe even manipulated. The artifact's presence lingered in the air, humming softly like it was waiting for something else to happen. One of the older guardians stepped forward, their voice trembling as they asked how the human had activated it. The human was honest, they didn't know. They explained the strange pull, the warmth, the feeling that the relic wasn't dangerous but familiar. The guardians exchanged worried looks. This wasn't the answer they wanted, but it was the only one that made sense. In the shadows of the chamber, a hidden doorway slowly slid open, its stone edges cracked with dust, revealing a passage no one had walked through in centuries. The relic's light flickered, pointing toward it like a silent command. The human felt a tug again, stronger this time, urging them toward the darkness behind the door. The guardians hesitated, unsure whether this was a warning or an invitation. But the human already knew they couldn't turn back. Whatever truth had been lost was hidden down there. Some guardians whispered that entering the forgotten passage could reveal more secrets about the Keeper Justice. Secrets that might change everything they believed about power, loyalty, and history. Others argued it was too dangerous to let a human go first, especially one marked by an unpredictable relic. But no one stepped forward to stop them. The mark on the human's arm glowed brighter, guiding their next steps, and the deeper they moved toward the unknown, the clearer it became that the artifact had only revealed the first piece of a much larger truth, one that the Council might not be ready to face when it finally comes into the light. The air in the hidden passage felt colder, as if the walls held memories that had never seen light. The humans stepped carefully, guided by the soft glow on their arm. Behind them, a small group of guardians followed at a distance, unsure whether they were escorting the human or simply afraid to let them walk alone into the unknown. The artifact floated ahead like a slow-moving lantern, revealing faded murals that stretched along the stone. The images showed figures standing side by side, guardians and humans working together in ways no one had ever taught in the present day. The guardians behind the human whispered among themselves, their voices nervous. This wasn't just lost history, it was forbidden truth. One of the younger guardians kept glancing at the human with a mix of conflict and curiosity. They had been raised to believe humans could never be trusted with anything powerful, yet here they were, following a human marked by the ancient Keeper Justice itself. Their thoughts kept circling back to the Council, whose authority relied heavily on controlling which histories were remembered and which were buried. If this passage proved that humans were once trusted partners, it would shake the foundation of their power. The young guardian wondered if the Council already knew and simply hid it away. The human noticed the guardian's uneasy expression but stayed silent. They were too focused on understanding the strange pool inside them. Ever since the artifact marked them, the sensation felt like distant memories trying to surface, not personal memories, something older, passed on through the artifact itself. Every step deeper into the passage made the human feel both heavier and more awake. Something was waiting for them down here, something tied to the truth behind the guilty verdict and the real purpose of the relic. As they walked, the passage widened into a chamber filled with broken statues and shattered symbols. The place looked like it had been destroyed on purpose. Some pieces still held traces of carvings that matched the mark on the human's arm. The guardians exchanged anxious looks, realizing this wasn't just an abandoned archive. This was a site that someone had tried to erase completely. The human felt a tug in their chest, almost like grief, even though they didn't understand why. The relic drifted toward the rubble, humming in recognition. Another subplot began to unfold when the oldest guardian knelt beside a fractured pillar. They traced their fingers over a symbol buried in dust, their expression tightening as a memory surfaced. They remembered being told, long ago, that there was once a great conflict between the First Council and the Keepers, but the details had always been kept vague. Now seeing these ruins, they realized the conflict wasn't just ideologically, it had been violent. It might have involved betrayal, and the human standing before them might be tied to a role that the Council had tried to erase completely. The chamber trembled softly, as if reacting to the artifact's presence. Stones shifted. Dust danced in the air. Somewhere deeper in the darkness, a low hum answered the artifact's glow. The human felt the pull again stronger, urgent, almost like a voice calling their name without sound. The guardians hesitated, fear climbing into their eyes. Because whatever was waking up in the hidden depths wasn't just part of their past. It was part of their future too, and it was only beginning to stir. The chamber vibrated with a low, steady rumble that grew stronger the deeper the human moved toward the dark corridor ahead. The artifact floated closer to the human's shoulder, its glow pulsing like a warning or a reminder. The guardians behind them exchanged tense glances, unsure whether to proceed or retreat. But something about the human's calm determination kept pulling them forward. It felt as if the entire passageway was holding back a truth that had been buried under fear, control, and silence for generations. As they entered a deeper section of the ruins, the walls shifted from cracked stone to smooth metal, ancient but advanced. Strange symbols lit up under the human's marked arm, responding to their presence. The guardians flinched at the sudden brightness, but the human felt an unexpected warmth in their chest. The relic was guiding them somewhere specific, somewhere important. The hum in the air grew sharper, almost like an echo of distant voices layered together. One guardian stepped closer and whispered that they should return before it was too late. Their voice trembled, not out of anger, but genuine fear. The human didn't answer. They knew going back would solve nothing. The Council had already made up their minds, and whatever waited here in the darkness was the only thing powerful enough to shift the balance. The young guardian who had been watching the human earlier now seemed torn between old teachings and the truth unraveling before them. Every new symbol on the wall made them question how much of their world had been built on half-told stories. The corridor opened into a massive underground hall, far larger than the one above ground. At its center stood a colossal structure, half machine, half monument, covered in dust and silent for centuries. But as the human stepped closer, lines of light flickered along its surface, waking piece by piece. The artifact's glow intensified until it felt like the air itself was vibrating with energy. The Guardians froze, realizing they were witnessing something none of their ancestors had ever seen. Statues of past keepers lined the hall, broken but still towering with silent authority. Some resembled Guardians, others resembled humans. The mix stirred a deep unease among the Guardians. It wasn't just cooperation shown, here it was equality. Shared leadership. A system that contradicted everything the Council had taught for countless generations. The oldest Guardian's breath shook as they tried to process the implications. If this structure was truly a Keeper's core, then awakening it could expose the full truth that might tear apart the Council's carefully controlled history. The machine-like monument emitted a pulse of light that washed over the hall. Dust spiraled up like drifting memories. As the human approached, the mark on their arm responded with a brilliant glow, projecting faint symbols into the air. The pulse grew louder, deeper, as if the monument recognized them in the same way the artifact had. Something ancient was unlocking. The young Guardian stepped forward, unable to contain their curiosity any longer. They asked the human what they thought was waking up. The human didn't know, but the feeling inside them, an overwhelming sense of connection, kept building, pushing them closer. Each step brought more pressure, more energy, more weight of the past pressing against the present. Suddenly, the ground trembled violently. Cracks raced across the floor. The entire hall lit up in streaks of blinding patterns that responded directly to the human's mark. Guardians stumbled back, shielding their eyes. The monument released another pulse, this one sharper, faster, almost like a heartbeat accelerating. The human reached out instinctively. The structure answered, and in that moment, everything in the hall shifted, preparing itself for something irreversible, something that would decide the fate of both humans and Guardians once and for all. The moment the structure answered the human's touch, the hall erupted with a deep, resonant surge of energy that raced through every broken statue and cracked symbol. Light shot across the walls like veins waking after a long sleep. The Guardians braced themselves against the vibration, expecting the monument to reveal forgotten history or unleash some ancient memory. But instead, something none of them had imagined began to unfold. The monument split open, not violently, but with a slow, deliberate motion, as if it had been waiting centuries for this exact moment. Inside it, layers of machinery shifted, revealing a second chamber hidden within. The artifact floated toward it, drawn by a force even stronger than before. The human felt the pull in their chest intensify until their pulse matched the rhythm of the glowing lines inside the structure. But then something unexpected happened, something that changed the direction of the conflict in an instant. The hidden chamber revealed not just ancient mechanisms, but another relic. This one wasn't silent or dormant. It was pulsing with unstable energy, flickering like a heartbeat out of control. Unlike the artifact that had chosen the human, this one felt wild, almost angry. The Guardians stared at it in confusion and fear. They recognized the shape. It was a Keeper relic, but its design was far different, sharper, more aggressive. The oldest Guardian whispered that this was the countermark, a myth they had hoped was only a story, a relic created not to guide, but to judge, not to choose, but to challenge. The humans stepped back without meaning to. The countermark reacted instantly, turning its flickering light toward them. The air thickened, carrying a tension that none of them understood. The artifact by the human side glowed defensively, almost like it was trying to shield them. The Guardians exchanged worried looks. Two relics should never have been awakened at the same time. One represented the Keeper justice. The other represented the Keeper's trial, an ancient mechanism meant to activate only when the world was divided beyond repair. And now it was awake. The young Guardian's voice trembled as they suggested that the countermark wasn't reacting to the human, specifically it was reacting to the artifact's choice. In their eyes, the human's marking wasn't just a recognition of past roles, it was a trigger for something much larger. Something that might force every Guardian and human to confront truths they weren't ready to face. Before anyone could respond, the countermark unleashed a wave of distorted light that swept across the hall. The floor cracked deeper, statues shattered. The walls shook so violently that dust rained down like falling ash, but the wave didn't strike the human. It hit the Guardians. Several stumbled, grabbing their heads as the light forced visions into their minds, visions they couldn't control. They saw fragments of the Council's secrets, pieces of suppressed history, and flashes of a past where humans and Guardians were not just partners, but equals. The countermark wasn't simply judging the human, it was judging them. The human rushed forward, instinct telling them they had to stop the relic before it tore the hall apart. But the artifact pulled them back, as if warning that getting too close would make everything worse. The hall shook again, harder, sharper, as if the two relics were clashing, each representing a different truth fighting to rise to the surface. The stakes had shifted. This wasn't just about proving the human's innocence. This was about deciding which truth would control the future, and which one would destroy everything if left unanswered. The two relics pulsed with rising intensity, their opposing lights clashing in the center of the hall. The human felt the force tighten around them like a storm building from every direction. Guardians struggled to stay upright while the air vibrated with a pressure that felt ready to break the entire chamber apart. The artifact beside the human glowed brighter, steady and warm, but the countermark's light kept twisting into sharp, chaotic streaks. It was clear that only one relic would define the truth that survived. The human took a breath and stepped forward, ignoring the warnings from the guardians behind them. The two relics responded instantly. The artifact drifted closer to the human, its glow stabilizing, while the countermark flared with violent bursts of energy, almost as if refusing to accept the new keeper justice. The human raised their marked arm not in defiance but in understanding. Somehow, they sensed the relics weren't fighting each other, they were waiting for a choice, a final decision that only the marked one could make. When the human placed their hand between the two glowing relics, the hall plunged into silence. The countermark shot out one last wave of energy, but the artifact absorbed it before it reached the human. Then the light rippled outward, filling the hall with a soft radiance. The statues stopped shaking, the cracks in the floor stilled. The vibration faded like a breath finally released. One by one, the guardians lowered their arms, watching in awe as the countermark's chaotic light dimmed and gently folded back into the monument. A warm glow wrapped around the human's arm, spreading across their chest in soft lines that formed a new, complete pattern. The mark of the keeper justice fully awakened. The artifact settled against their palm as if acknowledging the final step. The guardians stared, understanding the truth that had been hidden for so long. Humans had once been central to the balance of power, not forbidden from it. And now that balance had returned. The main conflict ended in a single, steady pulse of light that filled the hall with calm. The guardians bowed their heads, not out of fear but respect. For the first time, they saw the human not as an outsider, but as someone chosen to restore what had been lost. The accusations, the doubt, the buried history, all of it settled into clarity. Justice had spoken through the relic, and the human was no longer on trial. But just as the hall began to settle, a faint crackling sound echoed from deep inside the monument. The artifact in the human's palm flickered. The guardians tensed again, thinking the countermark was waking, but this energy felt different, lighter, almost like a message instead of a threat. A panel on the monument slid open, revealing a small crystalline core. Its surface shimmered with faint images, showing the first keepers walking together. But beneath those images was something else, something that made the human's breath catch a signature, not from the past, but recent. Someone had accessed the monument before the human ever arrived. Someone knew the truth and tried to erase it, hoping the relics would never awaken, and whoever it was still out there. The climax resolved the ancient conflict, but a new mystery emerged from the final glow of the monument, leaving the human staring into the shifting light, realizing the real danger had only just begun. The hall gradually calmed, and the echoes of the relic's energy faded into a gentle hum. The human stared at the crystalline core inside the monument, still trying to understand what the shifting images meant. The guardians gathered around it, their expressions troubled. The signature left behind wasn't a name, just a trace of someone who had interacted with the monument recently, someone with access, someone trusted. It was clear that the buried truth hadn't been lost by accident, it had been hidden on purpose. But for now, the structure seemed at peace, its purpose fulfilled after so many silent years. The oldest guardian placed a hand on the human's shoulder, their earlier fear replaced by a quiet respect. They admitted that the council had always controlled the flow of history, choosing what to share and what to seal away, believing they were protecting their world, but the relics had revealed that their protection had turned into limitation. The human's arrival and the relic's choice had forced them to confront what they had ignored. The young guardian, still shaken from the visions, stepped forward and promised that the truth would no longer be buried. The hall felt different now, lighter, as if even the ruins were relieved to finally breathe again. The human closed the panel on the monument, knowing the mystery of the signature would take time to unravel. But they also knew it didn't have to be solved today. The keeper justice mark on their arm pulsed softly, no longer heavy or demanding, but reassuring. It felt like a reminder that balance wasn't about power or control, it was about honesty and connection. The artifact floated beside them with a warm glow, almost like a companion ready for whatever came next. When they climbed back up the long passage toward the chamber above, the world felt changed. The guardians walked beside the human instead of behind, their steps steady and equal. Word had already spread through the council hall, and when the doors opened, the gathered crowd fell into stunned silence at the sight of the mark glowing along the human's arm. The traces of fear that once filled the room were now replaced with curiosity, hope, and even a hint of relief. The accusations from earlier felt distant, washed away by everything revealed below. The council approached slowly. Their faces carried a mix of regret and humility. They offered a sincere apology for the accusation, acknowledging that they had judged based on fear rather than truth. The human accepted the apology, not out of obligation, but because the relic's message was clear. Rebuilding trust mattered more than lingering hurt. And the human knew this moment was bigger than one misunderstanding. It was the start of rewriting how both sides understood their shared history. As the day faded, the artifact dimmed until only a faint glow remained, a quiet reminder of the journey that had reshaped their world. The human stood at the entrance of the ancient hall, feeling the weight of what had changed and what still needed to be discovered. The mysterious signature in the monument hinted that someone else had known the truth long before today. Their motives were still unknown, but their actions had set everything into motion. That unanswered thread lingered like a whisper, promising new challenges in the future. But for now, peace had returned. The truth had finally risen from the shadows, and the human, once declared guilty, now walked forward as a restored keeper of justice, marked forever, not by accusation, but by choice, purpose, and the story that would guide both humans and guardians into the future.